If you've been watching my channel for quite some time now, you know that I've been hinting at making more original character content this year. And in today's video, we'll be making a character sheet of one of them. This would have happened so much sooner. I can never commit to one design for a character, but we're changing that today as I sit down to finalize my character, Strawberry Saul. Strawberry Saul is a cowboy-inspired swordsman, so a mixture of like Western archetypes and like fantasy. And the basic premise of his story is that after abandoning his ambitions of pursuing knighthood, he gets hired by a renowned vampire hunter, Blueberry Bill, to join in his investigation to solve the mysterious deaths of their town's major officials, including Bill's father. So Saul was initially employed by Bill as extra support in traveling and in fighting vampires and other monsters throughout their investigation. But over the course of their journey, he discovers that his fate is tied to Bill in more ways than one. So yeah, that's the general story premise. Before we start getting into the design process, I want to dig a little bit more into the history of this character in my artwork. So the first pieces I made of Saul were from fall 2022 in my last semester in school. I was taking a printmaking class and did a little intaglio scratching of a cowboy bust that I initially coined Strawberry Saul due to the strawberry motifs on his hat and vest. This print then inspired a 24 by 36 acrylic painting I made for my independent study class, and then from then on it was just cowboys galore in a lot of my prints and paintings, and pretty much became the theme of that semester and what I was really interested in. I did a sketch for Sketchtober in 2022 as well. It was like an initial idea of Saul and Bill together, and then in 2023 I made a draw this in your style of Saul, which the process is on this channel, and then eventually I did a couple portrait of Bill and Saul, which is also on this channel. But other than that, there hasn't been too much official artwork of them, and that's why I wanted to create this character sheet. Their designs kept on developing and changing in every piece that I made of them, and I just wanted more consistency and a better reference for future artwork. The objective of this particular character sheet I want to make is to have at least 3 full body pose references, fully colored, an expression sheet, a portrait, and then some smaller iterations of like important aspects of his design, like a cowboy hat and sword. I know I only have about a week to get all of this done, so there is a time limit, and this is part of a project system. I've been giving myself like a weekly illustration project, and this was my project for mid-January. I think it was like my week 3 project. I've never done a full character reference sheet for one of my OCs before, so I know everything won't be fully figured out, but that's okay. That's how we learn. So after gathering all of my past references, clothing reference, and art inspiration, I got to work. And if you're wondering what software I'm using for storing all this lore and past work, I'm happy to share that it is Milanote, who are the sponsors of today's video. Milanote is a tool to organize your ideas and creative projects. You can store notes, images, videos, and even color palettes all in one board. One of my favorite aspects is that I can easily save art inspirations and clothing references using the Milanote web clipper, which saves me so much time and frustration during my art process. For this specific character design project for Strawberry Saul, I created different sections of my board for references, inspirations, and even included my own past work and some notes to keep me on track so that I can meet my goal for this project. It was so useful having a place for all those images and resources that I needed so that I could achieve the best design for my character and continue to improve my art at the same time. And once I have all the images I need, I can move them around on my board and view them all together instead of toggling between files on my computer to find a specific reference. Once again, it just makes my process of creating so much easier since everything I need is all in one place. I also really love when I labeled my board as Strawberry Saul, it instantly made the icon a little strawberry, which was just such a cute little surprise. As a creative, feedback and critique is crucial to the creative process. So if you're working with clients, doing commissions, or just want to share what you're working on with your friends, you can invite collaborators to your board to get important feedback in real time. I started using Milanote for pretty much all of my creative projects right now, and I don't know what I would do without it. It seriously has been a game changer for my art and creative process. And if you'd like to try it out yourself, Milanote is available for free with no time limit, so you can sign up using the link in my description to start your next creative project. Thank you so much to Milanote for sponsoring this video, and thank you you all for your viewership so that I can continue to get more sponsors like these. Now back to the video. So I'd previously drafted some tonal designs of Saul that were very basic, focusing mainly on shapes and like the general vibe of his designs. I really wanted to be able to infuse his Western style clothing with more fantasy knight aspects, but try and keep it subtle. So Saul is not a fully fledged knight. He kind of did a bit of like knight training, but never really like actually pursued the career. So he mainly just picks up odd jobs around town, and I don't think he'd be able to afford a whole armor set or really care to. So I wanted it to be more of a casual combat traveling style design, not too heavy or clunky, but just enough protection in the places that matter. So I wanted to include like a chest plate of some sort and maybe some like knee pads. So after this initial tonal design was finalized, I redrew the design with a little bit more detail with the help of references I've stored on Milanote. I was not really trying to focus on like copying exactly what I saw in the reference, but mainly grabbing little aspects and like vibes that I liked from each one and incorporating it into my more line focused design. I'm definitely not a strong line artist. I tend to be more painterly with my rendering, so I didn't need the sketch to be too clean or detailed because I knew I'd paint in some details during the finishing touches. Even though I wasn't trying to make things exact, it was important to me that the foundational drawing was strong and clear with what I wanted. I always find that if I have a really strong drawing, it makes the painting so much easier and saves me so much time in the future from having to go back and fix things. I also want to point out I chose a relatively simple pose for just this first pose because I wanted this initial design to be like purely for design reference and not necessarily showing his personality just yet. I wanted like a neutral pose so it wouldn't get in the way of his technical design. So once I got the sketch to the place that I wanted, I did a value composition for the design, referencing back to the tonal designs I drew earlier to achieve like a good contrast and clarity in the design. Another huge aspect of painting and coloring things in general is to make sure your values are clear, and that's why a lot of digital artists start rendering their pieces in black and white first. Most of the time, if your design is clear in black and white, then it'll be a great foundation for moving forward with color. Speaking of color, now it's time for color comps. Of course, Strawberry Saul would have to be like a rosy, pinky red color. It's in the name. At the time of his conceptualization back in 2022, I was really inspired by fruit in my work, specifically my color palettes. Like I remember being really into grape juice at one point and making a whole self-portrait inspired by grape juice. I was just really obsessed with like fruit flavors, I guess. And I knew it was important for his character design to get that kind of like whimsical, rosy feeling, just like a very, like a lush, rich feeling. So colors can reveal a lot about a character's role in a story and their personality. So I started off with a lot of like warm browns and reds, even some oranges. Saul is a supporting character in this story, and with his relationship with Bill, he's friendly, dependable, and humble. Having a lot of earthy tones connects to this like humble, like friendly, natural idea of him, and then the red adds a little bit more dimension to this. So red often is like associated with like romance and like passion and just intense feelings, and his role as a romantic interest, the physicality and passion of his combat skills, and of course the strawberry motif that is a really big part of his identity. Those tie in with like the color red. In actuality, Saul doesn't really get the title of Strawberry Saul until well into his story with Bill. His link to the strawberry plant is a lot deeper than just his clothing and color palette style, but I won't be sharing that in this video or on this channel just yet, so you guys are gonna have to wait for that. But I also included a little bit of like yellow or like gold into his design. I needed like a third color to make like the other colors pop, since the brown and red were so similar in hue. So I also think that motifs, I was like thinking about motifs of like golden, like having a heart of gold, or like golden boy, like those sayings were matching with his character. So yellow or gold was a fitting inclusion instead of like a silver breastplate or something of a different color. So overall, this color scheme I think is pretty analogous, except for like the color of his sword, which you guys will see later in this video, but nothing's seems too conflicting since I want him to have like a friendly, predictable, approachable vibe. Like you can meet him in a tavern, like play some drinking games, and he would get you home safely. Yeah, just like a sweet, reliable dude. Okay, now that I have the base pose down, it's time for the fun part of exploring Saul and the way he like carries himself and expresses himself. So I really wanted to have a pose of him dancing as well as a pose of him preparing to fight. I sketched out a ton of ideas in my sketchbook, looking at pose references and also trying to come up with my own for the dancing one, since a lot of his clothing ended up being inspired by like disco and kind of hippie fashion, almost like ABBA. So I thought it'd be fun to include some like a disco inspired pose. With Saul's character, he loves being around people and having a good time, so a dancing pose was perfect for sharing that more of kind of like carefree, physically expressive side of him. Most of the time he'd rather be napping, eating, or dancing, but unfortunately he needs money to survive, and that's where the other pose comes in. So with this more like sword fighting, like defensive pose, I went through a lot of iterations of the fighting pose, kind of switching between a more like defensive position and offense position, and it made me really want to like study more into sword fighting for my characters. I quickly realized my visual library of battle poses was really limited, so reference was a must for this process. I finally settled on like a basic pose with just like his sword above his head, but I really liked the silhouette of that pose, and it kind of matched the dancing pose. I feel like fighting is sometimes compared to dancing, so I really like that connection, and I also think it could be really cool to explore in the future, to draw him in more dynamic poses that are kind of like that are a fusion of like dance moves and like sword fighting. I feel like that could be really cool. But speaking of the sword, I ended up doing more of like a basic sword design for the hilt. I gave myself a bit of a break, but in the end, I really wish I had put a bit more effort into the hilt. In the original acrylic painting I did of Saul, the hilt of the sword was like really intricate strawberry vine inspired design that I would love to come back to. Like I remember spending so much like meticulous energy on designing that sword hilt, and I didn't even use it in this character sheet. So I think it was just laziness, but I also think I was running out of time for this project and decided to put my time more into the actual like clothing design and like his expressions and stuff like that. But weapon design also isn't my strongest skill either. I have a lot to learn there, but I could see it being really fun once I get like the hang of it and have a bit more of a visual library surrounding it. I decided to make the sword a bright green, kind of like almost like a bluish green to complement the red tones of his outfit. I love adding accent colors like these to my paintings and designs. I find it really visually pleasing, and I think it helps with the strawberry theme of like red and green. So overall, these poses really didn't take too long to color. The sketch was probably the longest part for both of these poses, but it really built a strong foundation for the painting and made it really fun to paint. So I just really had to match what I did with the neutral pose, and yeah, it was just really fun painting them. I remember being really excited to work on them in my art sessions, and I was just really enjoying the process, which is always a good thing. So moving on, as I was painting the full body poses, I also started to explore his actual expressions and his likeness. I do have to say this was a trickier part of the whole project because of the way I chose to render these expressions. I don't know why I made it harder on myself and like psyched myself out. I really wanted to keep the sketches alive and not render them out completely, and I had some like style inspirations on my mood board from other artists to kind of keep me on track. But unfortunately, I like the sketches so much more than the finished colored drawings. And I'm extremely tempted to go back and redraw all of them. And that's definitely something I've always struggled with, is keeping the gesture and energy of my drawings and paintings throughout the process of finishing them. And one of the best ways to solve that is to kind of keep on zooming out and keeping things loose and just practicing more. I know I'll keep this in my mind when I begin to tackle Blueberry Bill's character sheet, but The perfectionist in me is very harsh and wants me to get everything right the first time, but that's not realistic and it keeps you from learning and moving on to other drawings. Anyways, I still had fun drawing this little expression sheet. I definitely think I could improve his likeness on a couple, but ultimately it was really fun to see this character become more refined on paper, or in this case, I guess pixels. I feel like as artists, so much of our time designing happens in our head. And once we finally start to put it on paper and work out the kinks and begin to really develop the idea, it almost feels like magical, and that this character that's been living rent-free in your head for 2 years is finally solidifying and becoming something official. I think that's one of the coolest things about being an artist, and it's so invigorating and inspiring to continue to build that world. Anyways, with any subpar drawing session, there are always those times that follow up and improve the difficulty you face to be worth it. And that is what I experienced with this little portrait painting of Saul. I wanted to include a more detailed rendering of his face with the character sheet with like a slightly neutral but happy expression, because I feel like Saul is like one of those people who smiles to himself and naturally just has like a positive expression on his face. So I went ahead and sketched out a quick portrait, and soon after I colored it. I think I did it in an afternoon or something. I got to play around a little bit more with how I wanted him to look by adding some freckles and some more facial texture. Just having a lot of fun with his facial hair and eyelashes, and overall just finalizing more of his likeness. It was a very self-indulgent process. Like I said, this process was a lot more easier and faster than the expression sheet. I think the expression sheet was kind of like the practice for myself, for this portrait. And now that I really like the portrait, potentially doing a redraw of the expression sheet in the future could be a good option as well. I don't know, maybe I just need to practice getting more lively, believable expressions. But anyways, this was really fun, and I love how soft and friendly he looks, and the rim lining works so well. I feel like rim lighting is such an art hack that whenever I add it to a drawing, it instantly adds so much more oomph to a piece. Now that his outfit is designed and we have all these expressions and portraits, I explored a little bit more into the items I wanted to include for his reference sheet. So his hat and sword are one of the most iconic parts of his design, so I thought it'd be important to include little illustration diagrams of them and just keep it simple. So for Saul's hat, I was aiming for a simple, generic cowboy hat with a little bit of wear and tear from age and maybe some battles he's gotten into. The little sewed on flower was a fun touch, and I think it shows more of his creative or decorative side. Maybe he has an appreciation of fashion or the arts. So I could so clearly imagine him cutting out a piece of pink fabric to sew on his hat to make it a little bit more unique to him and bring a pop of color to the brown of his design. I don't know, just a little headcanon I have for him. So as for his sword, like I said before, I didn't get to do too much detail due to time, and I wasn't sure if it would distract from him or fit with his design, since I wanted his design to be a bit more scruffy and simple, because he doesn't have a lot of money and he's kind of just working with hand-me-downs and stuff. So adding a super intricately designed sword didn't exactly feel right. But then again, I know with the lore of this sword and story-wise where that sword has come from, it possibly has some enhanced abilities, maybe a bit of magic. So maybe adding a little bit more to the design would aid in that idea and maybe bring up some questions about how did this rough and tumble cowboy get this super epic sword. I'm not sure. That's a problem for future Shay. Maybe this sword kind of evolves with him as his skills develop. We'll see. So after finishing the sword design and adding a title and a bit of text, the character sheet is finally done. Now it's time for a bit of healthy self-critique. So first, let's talk about the things that I really liked about this design. I think I really love how the color palette turned out. I think color designs and color palettes is one of my best skills when painting, and I think this palette really matches Saul and his personality. I also really love how his portrait turned out. I think his expression is so sweet and the structure of his face turned out exactly how I wanted it to. It's really been rare for me lately to like what I make, but I find a lot of joy and encouragement in that little headshot that I did. I also really just enjoyed like the process of working on this project. It made me excited to draw every day, and my favorite part of the day was always spent working on this sheet. And I could tell I was working towards the projects and the art that matters to me, and that this project was like a stepping stone to getting where I want my art to be. Now, for some things I would do differently moving forward, or some things that I want to practice for future projects. I definitely need to work on my design consistency. So paying attention to little details of his clothing and proportions of certain areas, really nailing those down will bring another level to the technical aspect of this character design and bring a lot more professionalism to his design. I could see a lot of inaccuracies between the poses and between the expressions. So practicing that skill of capturing that likeness multiple times and being able to replicate his clothing, that's really important to me on a technical level. I also really need to get more creative with my item and weapon design. I know I can do so much more with that sword, as I've proved to myself in the past with the previous painting I've done. I just need to stop being lazy and just just do it. The expressions are my least favorite part of this sheet. I feel like they got way too stiff while adding color, but I think that balance and keeping the gesture and energy just comes from practice and keeping things a little bit looser when I apply color. I struggle with this across my art, so I'm hoping as I continue to do more finished paintings and just like making more art in general, I can improve on the skills so I can match the energy that I want. And also, I would love to include, I don't know why I didn't include it. I was thinking about it like halfway as I was working through this character reference sheet, but I would love to include like a back reference of him, because I have like this idea of doing like a really cool like back design on his jacket. But I just didn't end up doing that. I can so easily add that to the sheet. But yeah, I think it'd be really helpful to have like a reference of his back, so it would give a better 3D reference of him. All in all, I'm content with how this sheet turned out. There are a lot of things I like and a lot of things I think that could have been different or deserved a little bit more attention, but I'm happy to finish something and develop a character I really care about. It's my first time making an official character sheet for any of my original characters, which was a little overwhelming at first and a little kind of like disappointing that I hadn't made something like this for such a long time, but it's been so worth it to my art and the stories that I care about. I don't have any big plans for Saul and the story he's a part of yet, but it's just been fulfilling in a personal sense to be able to bring the ideas in my head to life and develop them visually. Basically, the magic of being a visual artist. And it makes me super excited to do it again for Bill and all my other characters. And ultimately, I hope you enjoyed seeing this development and process with designing Strawberry Saul. And that's it. There's Saul's character design 1.0, because I will most definitely return back to his design and try new things and add new elements as I develop him and his world. This was originally my week 3 illustration project this year, but it definitely overlapped with my other projects and took me a little bit longer to complete. I feel like it was maybe like a week and a half. This is my first time making an official sheet of any kind for a character, and I really enjoyed the process. But I know there is so much more for me to learn in the design world. Still, I'm looking forward to continuing to learn and figure out my funky cowboy dudes, and I can't wait to apply everything I've learned to Bill's character sheet in the future, which will probably be coming out in March sometime. So make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell notification to be notified when that video posts. But thank you all so much for watching. I know a lot of you have been asking for this type of video, talking more about my OCs, specifically Bill and Saul, so I'm happy to share more about them and hopefully about some other stories I have too. But thank you again to Milanote for sponsoring this video and being the foundation for this design project. I'm really looking forward to using this in basically all of my future work, and if you want to do that as well, there's a link down in the description. And yeah, that's it. Next week's video is, let me check my schedule. Oh, it's Why I Left Kofi, quote, the burden of success. Oh, sounds like a super interesting video that you shouldn't miss. So you should subscribe. All right, see you guys next week. Bye.